Hello and welcome to What the F Just Happened Today, your essential guide to the daily shock and awe in national politics. I'm Joe Amditis. Let's get to it. It's Monday, December 6th, 2021. Welcome to day 321. The Biden administration announced a diplomatic boycott of the 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing, citing China's, quote, ongoing genocide and crimes against humanity in Xinjiang and other human rights abuses, end quote. American athletes, however, are still free to participate in the Games. Both Democrats and Republicans in Congress, as well as human rights advocates, have called on the Biden administration to pressure Beijing over abuses against the Uyghur community, which has been declared a genocide both by Biden and the Trump administration, as well as China's crackdown on pro-democracy free speech protests in Hong Kong, China's recent aggression towards Taiwan, its pursuit of hypersonic weapons, and its secrecy surrounding the origins of the coronavirus pandemic. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said the White House is looking to send a clear message that the human rights abuses in China mean there cannot be business as usual. Moving on, the Justice Department sued Texas over its plan to redraw congressional and state legislative voting districts, alleging that the Republican-led legislature's redistricting plans disenfranchise minorities in violation of the Voting Rights Act. Texas's redistricting plan, quote, denies Black and Latino voters the equal opportunity to participate in the election process, end quote, and was created with, quote, discriminatory intent, end quote. This according to Associate Attorney General Vanita Gupta. The suit claims that Texas is refusing to recognize, quote, the state's growing minority electorate, end quote, and asks the court to stop the state from holding elections under the new maps and to redraw Texas's congressional and state House districts for 2022. The DOJ previously sued Texas and Georgia over laws limiting ballot access. Meanwhile, the metadata in a draft letter written by a Trump Justice Department official indicates, quote, some involvement with the White House, end quote, in Trump's failed attempt to overturn the 2020 election results. In December 2020, Jeffrey Clark drafted a letter to the Georgia governor and legislative leadership urging them to convene a special session of the legislature to investigate voter fraud claims. The metadata in the file indicates that the White House communications staff may have worked on the draft letter, which encouraged Georgia to appoint new electors who would overturn its election results and swing the presidential election to Trump. Clark had urged then-acting Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen and acting Deputy Attorney General Richard Donoghue to sign the letter, saying, quote, I think we should get it out as soon as possible, end quote. Rosen and Donoghue, however, refused to send it. Clark was scheduled for a deposition before the House Select Committee investigating the Capitol riot on Saturday, but it was rescheduled for December 16th because he had a, quote, medical condition that precludes his participation, end quote. Members of the Select Committee, meanwhile, are pushing to rewrite the Electoral Count Act of 1887, the law that Trump and his allies tried to use to overturn the 2020 election results. Proposed reforms include clearer time limits for states to choose their electors, limiting what a lawmaker can object to, and clarifying that the vice president's role in the process is clerical and lacks the authority to unilaterally throw out a state's votes, which Trump and his allies urged Mike Pence to do. Meanwhile, Sidney Powell raised more than $14 million off of her baseless claims of voter fraud in the 2020 election. Powell is currently being sued for $1.3 billion by Dominion Voting Systems for defamation over her claims that the company rigged the election against Donald Trump. She has also claimed that no reasonable person would believe that her own false conspiracy theories about widespread election fraud were statements of fact. Moving on, Devin Nunes resigned from Congress and went to become CEO of Trump's new media company. The shell company taking Trump's social media startup public, however, is currently under investigation by two federal regulators. The SEC is investigating the potential merger between Trump Media and Technology Group and the special purpose acquisition company Digital World Acquisition, which may have violated securities rules by failing to disclose discussions it was reportedly having before initially raising nearly $300 million. Nunes is the top Republican on the House Intelligence Committee and will begin his new role in January. And finally, the Omicron variant of the coronavirus has now been identified in at least 17 U.S. states since December 1st, when the first case was first reported in California. New York City, meanwhile, announced a coronavirus vaccine mandate for all private employers to combat the spread of the Omicron variant. Mayor Bill de Blasio called the mandate a preemptive strike to slow another wave of cases and help reduce transmission during the winter months. Since May 2021, people living in counties that voted heavily for Trump in the presidential election are nearly 3 times as likely to die from COVID-19 as those who live in areas that voted for Biden. That's all for now. You can find the links and sources for all of these stories on the main website. And as always, visit whatthefuckjusthappenedtoday.com for the latest news and headlines. Until next time, I'm Joe Amditas.